Welcome to your main newscast right here on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. I am Joshua Van Sleckman. Thank you for joining us. In our headlines this afternoon, why did the government present false cap on flaring, according to Dr. Vincent Adams? Meanwhile, RAM adds voice to calls for transparency of oil records. Natural Resources Ministry gets partially $150 million for 2021 petroleum sector budget. Oil and gas development programs slashed by more than half. And Suriname offers help to set up national oil company. And government touts natural resources curriculum for secondary school. And meanwhile, Giftland boss claims harassment over COVID-19 curfew. Police says not so. Get the full details of these stories and much more when the news returns. Joined us, this is your main newscast. Following admissions by ExxonMobil and the government that there is no cap of 14 billion cubic feet of flaring at the Liza Phase 1 operation, former EPA head Dr. Vincent Adams said that a critical question to be answered is why the government was so abstained in presenting false information to the public. It was the Vice President, Dr. Bharath Jagdeo, who said that Exxon was given an allowance to flare or to use 14 billion cubic feet of gas. No one could point out where in the EIA the figures were stated. Minister of Natural Resources Vikram Bharat's PR admitted that no such allowance was permitted. ExxonMobil last Thursday also admitted during a press conference that there is no allowance of the 14 billion cubic feet of gas to flare. And meanwhile, the Ministry of Natural Resources, which holds responsibility for the management of the country's petroleum sector, was allocated a partially $150 million as part of the multi-year oil and gas sector development program. This would mean that the 2021 budget for the program has been slashed by $193 million since it would have been allocated $343 million in 2020. In addition to a $120 million that was budgeted and spent in 2019. That $4.2 billion multi-year program is being funded by the International Development Association, a component of the World Bank's group. Additionally, the ministry has earmarked $44 million in the capital expenditure for the purchase of furniture and equipment. Canadian-based oil and gas firm CGX is gearing to spend some $90 million to spud the exploration well in the Quarantine block in the second half of 2021. According to the company, the primary target for the exploration well is comparable in the discoveries immediately to the east on Block 58 in Suriname. And meanwhile, we tell you now that if Guyana sees the need to establish a national oil company, then Suriname says it was willing to offer its support to achieve that goal. So said Rudolf Elias, CEO of Suriname's national oil company, Statoil. Elias outlined how Suriname is able to challenge and question the millions in costs handed to it by international oil companies, while noting how this was made possible through the establishment of Statoil. This, the CEO highlighted, should form the basis for Guyana to establish its own National Oil Commission, equipped with competent, skilled individuals who can be partners of choice for international oil companies. You're listening to us right here on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM, and this is your news afternoon. Stay with us, more news after the break.
A lot has happened since oil was discovered in 2015. With a difference.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining us. Transparency advocates have been calling for the government to release records on oil reports dating back to the beginning of oil production. Notably, those records would assist in the conduct of independent studies on the oil revenue and what Guyana is set to collect from the sector. However, agencies and transparency advocates continue to work with insufficient data and records from the government. Now, attorney-at-law and transparency advocate Christopher Ram is adding his voice in the calls for the government to show the willingness to share the same records. Vice President Dr. Bharath Jagdeo had committed in February that the government will make the reports available to the press. 3 weeks later, the press does not have access to these reports. The Ministry of Natural Resources is hoping to implement an adequate natural resources curriculum in secondary schools across Guyana. This is in hopes of erasing stereotypes about the natural resources industry, equipping young persons with the necessary knowledge needed if they are to venture into the sector and boost local capacity. This was revealed by Minister of Natural Resources Vikram Bharat. We tell you now that Giftland's boss, Roy Bepat, is of the opinion that the Georgetown police are singling out and harassing his business establishment over the COVID-19 curfew. The Guyana Police Force, in response, however, stated that this is not the case and that its ranks are doing their job in enforcing the COVID-19 regulations. According to the Guyana Police Force, it was made aware that BPAT had stated that the Giftland Mall and its concessions are continuously being singled out for the selective enforcement and police harassment. Get the full details of this in today's Kaieteur News. It is 12 hours 9 in Guyana and right across the Eastern Caribbean. We head across to your COVID-19 updates. The Ministry of Health yesterday reported 2 elderly females as the latest COVID-19 fatalities, increasing the death toll to 203. The deceased are a 64-year-old female from Region 10 and a 69-year-old female from Region 4. 7 new infections were recorded yesterday, increasing the infected toll to 8,814. 8 patients are in the COVID-19 ICU, another 14 in institutional quarantine, 43 in institutional isolation, and 389 in home isolation. Additionally, a total of 8,171 persons have recovered to date, with 57 new recoveries recorded yesterday. And we tell you now that the U.S. CDC advised against the co-administration of the COVID-19 vaccine. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the U.S. has advised against the co-administration of COVID-19 vaccines and other vaccines. This is because data is lacking on the safety of the vaccine being administered. The U.S. CDC said that the series of the COVID-19 vaccine should be routinely administered alone. Notably, most COVID-19 vaccines are administered in 2 doses, weeks apart. When the vaccines are administered, there should be a minimum interval of 14 days before or after administration of any other vaccines, according to the CDC. And just before I wrap things up here on your main newscast, let me turn my attention to page 7 of the Kaieteur News that is dedicated being blunt. Now that International Women's Day is over, How many of us are still speaking out in support of the women in our lives and amplifying our voices when people seek to silence them? Let's see what the situation is like a week from now, or a month, when people don't have a date on the calendar to remind them to engage in the virtue singling. We must be supportive of our women folk every day. And that is the blunt in page 7. You can get a copy of the Kaieteur News by picking up a copy rather and turning to page 7. And with that, we've come to the end of your main newscast right here on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. Let me remind you that you can get the full details of these stories and much more by picking up a copy of the Kaieteur News at a newsstand near you, or head across to our website at kaieteurnewsonline.com. I am Joshua Van Slegman. Thank you for joining us. Have a great remainder of your Tuesday, and encouraging you to stay with us right here on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM.